Good morning again. Go ahead and open up the Springbrook app there on your phone or your tablet. If you're new to Springbrook and you have not yet downloaded that, you can do that right now wherever you get your apps from. And once you click that app open, you'll see a place where it says message outline. And even if you decide to take no notes this morning, here's what I would invite you to do. At least follow along, because this is going to be very, very practical today. In fact, I'm going to go uber practical. I've been that way before, and I want to do this. And for some of you in the room, listen, and some of you watching, you're going to say, I already know this information. And chances are you might. But here's what I also know. You know people in your life, in your neighborhood, your family, who may not know this information. And this is one of those things that I would just encourage you to take some notes on. Well, I'm glad to have all of you in the room and online with us for this second week in our series called Strapped. And if this is your first time, or maybe you missed last week, in this series we're looking at how we can manage our money with wisdom. Now, if you missed last week, no harm, no foul. I want to encourage you to go and listen to the message, because each week builds on top of the week before, and you can simply do that by going to springbrookchurch.org to listen. See, our key verse for this series is this. Look on the screen here. Proverbs 22:7, it says, "The rich rule over the poor, and the borrower," now what's the borrower? It's the person, right, that's in debt. The borrower is what? Say it out loud, is servant to the lender, right? And we discovered last week that Old Testament Hebrew word translated as servant really means a slave. It means to be in bondage. In other words, if we're in debt, we're strapped. We're actually in bondage. But as we talked about last week, most people don't go around saying, hey, listen, I'm a slave to money, or I'm in bondage to Best Buy. Instead, what they often do is they say it in a different way that implies that they're in bondage financially. For example, they'll say things like, man, I'd love to take a different job, or I'd love to have more children, or we'd love to get married, but we can't afford it. And what they're really saying beneath all of that is, we're strapped and we're in bondage financially. Now, we also looked at Matthew 6:24, where Jesus said this, you cannot serve two masters. Either you'll hate the one and love the other, you'll be devoted to one and despise the other. And then interestingly enough, he said this, you cannot serve both God and, what does it say there? You can't serve God, both God and money. And of all the things he could have said, right, he chose money because he knew that for many of us, money would be the number one competitor for our hearts. So last week we looked at this idea that you and I don't serve money. However, if we're in debt, let's be honest, we're a slave to money. And then we looked at some ways that we're actually serving money. And for some of us, last week, some of you talked to me afterwards, I heard from you, and you said, we didn't even know this because, right, it doesn't show up in a spreadsheet or a wallet. It shows up in our heart. And the big takeaway from last week was this, we don't serve money, we serve, what's it say? And money serves us as we serve God, right? We're not going to be in bondage by debt. We're not going to be strapped, unable to do what we believe God is calling us to do because we don't have the financial resources. So let me try it again. We don't serve what? We don't serve money. Who do we serve? We serve, right? Money serves us as we serve whom? Who do we serve? God, right. All right, so here's what I want to do. I want us to go a little retro right now. I want to check out this old rule. And for those of you that are maybe in your 70s or above, and that those of you who are in that, you'll definitely remember this rule. Some of you at home watching, you're 70s or above. And the rest of us, when we hear this rule, we're going to think, that is the craziest rule that I've ever heard. Because this used to be the rule that for centuries was the guardrail for people when it came to their finances. Are you ready? That's weak. Are you ready? Okay, good. This was the rule. Look, if you didn't have the money to buy something you wanted, you weren't allowed to buy it. And I know you're like, that is so crazy. I don't understand. Man, I don't get it. I mean, what does that mean? So let me try it again. I thought, you know what, that was kind of complicated. So let me make it as simple as I know how. It goes like this. If you don't have the money to buy what you want, you weren't allowed to buy it. Was that better? Right? Some of you are still scratching your heads and you're thinking, I don't get it. Can't you just charge it? right? And that was the rule, that you actually had to have the money to buy something. Now, let me show you real quickly how things changed. Before the Great Depression in America, only 2% of the homes had a mortgage against them. Think about that, right? Watch this. 4 decades later, 40 years later, only 2% of homes did not have a mortgage against them. That's how quickly things changed. And those of you that maybe had a mom or a dad or a grandparent that grew up in the Depression era, you remember how they pinched pennies? And if you were a child of one of those adults, most of you said, man, when I get out of their house, I'm not saving tinfoil anymore, right? I'm throwing that stuff away, right? I'm going to live on the edge. And yet some of you, come on, you're at the age that you should be retiring, and yet you're going, man, I think we're going to have to work for a long time. And maybe part of the reason is because you didn't save money along the way because, hang on, don't get mad, because you thought you deserved better. And do you know in part what's happened? Look at this. There's been an entitlement mindset in generation after generation. Now, we even see it now. Now, present company excluded. I'm talking about the 10:30 service, okay? Okay? Don't worry, at 10:30 I'll tell them I was talking about you. So, right? So here's what happens. Many in their 20s think, hey, I'm 23, I deserve the same lifestyle as my parents. I want to have the same home and drive the same car and take the same vacations because I deserve it, watch, and I deserve it now. And what we've created in our culture is a generation of pretenders, right? They've got all the stuff, but behind all that stuff, they've got all the debt. They don't really own the stuff, it owns them. And as a result of that, they're strapped. Now, the Bible addresses this pretty plainly. Look at Proverbs 13:7. Notice what it says. One man does what? One man to be rich, yet how much does he have? He has nothing. It's amazing, isn't it? There are really 3 groups of people today in our country. Look at this. There are the haves, the have-nots, and the have-not paid for what they got. They're pretenders, right? And the pretenders living in your house and the pretenders living next door to you, they're in debt and they're in bondage. So what we want to do today is we want to look at 3 essential values that will apply to every area of our life. So if you say, hey, man, I'm good on the financial part, you're not even talking to me. But these are absolutely essential for all of us that want to become unstrapped and debt-free. Are you ready? Here we go. Value number 1. We must choose to embrace the value of self-control. Okay, everybody out loud, say it with me. Say self-control. That wasn't bad. Now say it again with a smile on your face. That's harder, isn't it? Huh? You can't say self-control with a smile, right? Proverbs 25:28 says it like this. Like a city whose walls are broken down is a man who lacks what? What's it say? Self-control, right? If we do not have financial self-control, the Bible says we're like a city without walls. We're defenseless to attacks, we're vulnerable to debt, and we have no defense against the consequences financially. With no self-control, I promise you, you will end up in trouble financially. And the problem is, this is for all of us, we all battle with self-control, right? We have this little kid inside of us. You've seen that little kid in the grocery store, you know what I'm talking about, who wants a candy bar or a toy. And what do? They start throwing a fit and they scream at their mom or their dad, I want it now. But as an adult, it's not a candy bar. Rather, it's clothing or jewelry or a car or a vacation. And the problem is, we want it now. Now, have you heard people say something like this, right? I bought this, fill in the blank, whatever it is. I bought this thing that I got on sale for 20%. Look at how much money I've saved. Now, listen, just because you got something on sale doesn't mean you save money. This is kind of an epiphanal moment. It is going to be for some of you. Think about this. You actually save money if you don't buy something. That was deep, wasn't it? Or have you heard someone say, I decide to buy this certain car because have you seen the gas prices? $4 a gallon. It's going to save me money on gas. Think about this. by the time you factor in sales tax and the interest rate on the car loan and the money you might have lost on the trade-in, not to mention the depreciation that happens with automobiles, that 40, 50 cents a gallon would have been cheaper to pay. Now, I'm not saying don't enjoy life, right? I'm not saying sell your car, walk home today. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying never buy anything. But when you're trying to get out of debt, we're going to need to learn to say this powerful word to ourselves. Say it with me. The word is no. Yeah. So, what we're going to do is we're going to say no for a little while so we can say yes for the rest of our lives. We're going to learn the value of self-control. All right, value number 2. We must choose to embrace the value of sacrifice. One of the most common themes throughout the Bible is sacrifice. Hebrews 12:2 shows us how Jesus modeled this. Look what it says. Let us fix our eyes on, what's the word? Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the, what's the word? Joy set before him. All right, what was his joy? It was the joy of pleasing God and knowing that you and I, because of his death, would have access to God through that sacrifice. For the joy set before him, what did he do? What does it say? He endured the cross. He made that brutal sacrifice for something he wanted even more, the joy set before him. So I want to help you here because you may be wondering, how does Springbrook define sacrifice? It's this. It's giving up something you love for something you love even more. Let me explain what I mean. You might love getting home from work and vegging out and watching cable television, but you also want for the first time ever to have a debt-free Christmas in 2022, right? None of you want to still be paying for this coming Christmas in the May of the following year. And so you give up your cable television for the year for something you want even more, a debt-free Christmas, right? You may want a bigger house. But what you want even more is for one of you to stay home and raise the kids, or for your kids to go to private school or whatever. And so you make the sacrifice. You give up the bigger home for something that you want even more. Some of you may be in college and you love your alone time. But even more than that, you want to graduate with no student loans. So you take in 2 or 3 roommates, you sleep on the sofa, you do whatever it takes, you give up something you love for something you love even more, which is getting out of school without student loan debts. How about this one? This is going to hit home. You may love going to lunch every day and eating a $7 or $8 sandwich and a $2 drink, and $10 is blown before you know it. But you may love even more paying off your car. So instead of eating out, you brown bag it. The whole point you get is the idea of sacrifice. By the way, I just thought I'd throw this in here. Do you know approximately how much money you could save over a lifetime of working if you chose to brown bag your lunch every day? Are you ready? Look, $112,000. Some of you going, we're never eating out again. Some of you don't have that long, right? Think about it. You simply brown bag your lunch. Now, everybody doesn't have to do that, but you give up something you love for something you love even more. It's the value of sacrifice. But the problem in our culture is that you and I are asking the wrong questions, right? Think about this. When we go buy something, a car, a TV, whatever it is, and nothing wrong with those things, here's what we often ask. How much down and how much a month? Isn't that right? You go buy a car. The first thing you want to know is, how much down do I have to pay? Because I probably don't have it in my account because I haven't been savings, right? That's what's happened to America. And how much does it cost me a month? Instead, here's what we ought to be asking. How much is the real cost, and how much is this going to cost me over the many months of payments? So I want to show you a real-life example. And for those of you who are older in this room and watching us online, you're not exempt from the power of this. But those of you 40 and under, I don't want you to miss what you can learn from this, and I want you to think about how different your life could be 10 or 20 years from now if you actually embrace the value I'm about to show you. Now, if you missed last week, we looked at some statistics. One of them was the statistic of those who carry a credit card balance. Look at this. The average credit card balance in America, $14,517. And I know the question for some of you, like, I don't even have a credit card, right? Some of you would say. How did someone get that kind of debt? Well, they might have said, well, we've got to take the kids to Disney while we're still young. Now listen, Rachel and I and our sons, they're older now, married, we took our sons to Disney. Do you know how much it costs to take 4 people to Disney? Around $14,000. You say, not if you stay off park. It doesn't cost that much either if you take them to the fair locally, but who wants to do that? I'm just saying. Your kids, we're going to the fair or Disney. Naturally, they're going to pick Disney. Or how about this? I got to have this flat screen TV with theater surround sound system for my new 1-bedroom apartment. 500 square feet? Yeah, you need surround sound. And my new furniture that I just bought to decorate. 14 grand. So here's the big question, right? What's the real cost of paying on that credit card debt? All right, so let's assume a minimum payment of $217.93 at 18% interest rate on that credit card. Now, I'm being gracious there. Most interest rates right now are 23 to 27% interest. Okay, think about this. And some of you are like, this is getting really uncomfortable. Would you just preach on sin? I like that subject better, right? If you simply pay the minimum payment of $217.93 at 18%, how many years will it take you to pay off that debt? Little survey. How many of you think 5 years? You're afraid to raise your hand on anything right now, right? How many want to give to Springfield? How many? 7 years. 7 years. 8 years. Look at this. It will take 40 years to pay off that debt. By the way, parents, when your kid goes to college freshman year, do you know what the first thing they'll get in their mailbox is a credit card offer? And you know what they'll say to you? Mom, I need to establish my credit. Credit ratings are for people who are in debt, not for people who are out of debt. If you're bragging about your credit score, you've misunderstood what the credit score really means. It just means you've paid off a lot of debt. So how much does that 14 grand cost you over the full length of time? Look at this. The answer is $104,000 plus. That's an expensive trip to Disney. That's what the real cost is. And when you finance on your credit card, listen, that's what's happening to you unless you pay it off completely every month. But what if you didn't go to Disney, which I personally like Disney, or buy a TV and surround sound and new furniture, and you managed to save up that same $14,000, and instead you invested it for 40 years? Look at this. If you could get a 12% return over 40 years, that same amount of money, $1.3 million. That's a game changer, isn't it? How much of a difference do you think you could make in this world if you had the money like that? See, we wouldn't just feel bad for the people on the other side of the world. We could actually do something. How much of a difference do you think would happen in your life if you said, you know what, today, starting today, I'm going to break out of the mold, and instead of doing it like all my friends do, I'm going to focus on sacrifice and self-control. Let me ask you a question. Is this practical? Yeah, too much. All right, value number 3. We must choose to embrace the value of planning. Look what Jesus said in Luke 14:28. Suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Won't you first sit down and estimate the cost to see if you have what? What's it say? Read it. Enough money to complete it. Don't you want to first see if you have enough money before you go and try to buy it? See, in America, you don't have to have the money. You just have to have a good credit score. Proverbs 21:5 says, the plans of the diligent lead to profit as surely as haste leads to poverty. You ever made a bad financial decision? Raise your hand, everyone in this room. You know, most of the time when you made that bad financial decision, you were in a hurry. What did the salesman say? Listen, I don't know if it's going to be here tomorrow. We better buy it now, right? Here's the deal. We can wander into debt, but you cannot wander out, right? We've got to get a plan. If I had more time, I'd go into a detailed explanation of how to create a budget, but it's a longer conversation. In fact, I told you last week, my budget, this is my personal iPad here, our budget sits right here. Okay? So what I want to do is recommend that you go to our website or our app and that you get the Dave Ramsey information that Springbrook has paid for you to have free. So when you go to our website or our app, listen, we're not going to check on your finances. We don't have some secret code where we see what you make. This is for you to be able to learn these tools. There's tools, videos that you can use and watch to help you in the process of planning financially. You say, Matt, you just want us to give money to Springbrook. Well, listen, I'm not going to lie about it. This is a nonprofit. The way we survive and the way we do our ministry is when people give it. But this is way bigger than you giving money to Springbrook. This is about you being healthy financially. Dave Ramsey talks about several baby steps that all of us can begin to live our wage. So I want to give you the first two. Some of you have heard this, I know. Grins, hear it for the first time again. Baby step number one. The first step we're going to take is we're going to save $1,000 for emergencies. Things are going to break. Your refrigerator is going to break down. Ours did 2 weeks ago. Your car's going to get a flat tire. Mine did, and a week later, so did Rachel's. Your kid is going to get to stick a marble up his nose, and you're going to have to go to the emergency room to try to get that thing out. Notice I didn't say Rachel's name there, okay? The question for many people is, how are we going to get $1,000, Matt? If I had $1,000, I wouldn't be in this mess. I don't know specifically, but let me give you some ideas. You ready? Sell some stuff. Facebook Marketplace or OfferUp are your best friends. One man's junk is another man's emergency fund, okay? Sell everything you have until your kids are actually nervous, okay? Number two, telling you. Two, get a second job. You say, Matt, I don't want to work a second job. You don't want to have an emergency either that you can't pay for. And believe me, there are jobs everywhere out there. Have you seen the signs? You don't have to work 40 hours a week, right? Number three, use coupons, not Groupon, okay? Don't come home and say, oh, I save 50% on a lip wax on Groupon. Listen, if you didn't know you needed it until you saw it on Groupon, you're not saving money, you're spending money, and that will not help you towards your savings of $1,000 for emergency. All right, you good? Baby step number two. Second thing you're going to do is what Dave Ramsey calls the debt snowball. Now, let me show you how this is done. Look at me for a second. This is the absolute best and fastest way to get unstrapped and to free yourself from the bondage of debt. Think about this. Remember last week Rachel was standing up here talking about what happened to us early in our marriage with credit cards. Did you remember that? Were you here? Right? I know you're talking about it. I can't believe the pastor and his wife are that stupid. Well, you found out, okay? Here's the deal. Right? What we practiced in that moment, Dave Ramsey hadn't written a book yet, right? He was still poor like we were. But here's the deal. I'm being silly. Here's the deal. We practice this very thing. And so what I'm about to cover with you is one of the most important things about personal finances that you will ever learn. You ready? Look on the screen, okay? This is an imaginary list of debts that all of us owe. In the first column are the different people or businesses we owe money to, right? The second column are the total amounts owed to each one. Notice, we owe $450 to Lowe's because there were some power tools that we absolutely needed and couldn't live without. $650 to Target for the clothes, and while we were there, we picked up some groceries we bought. The third one down, we owe $1,600 to our parents. They let us borrow some money. We told them we'd pay it back. The air conditioner went out last summer, and we had to have our air conditioning fixed. In the third column, you'll see the minimum payment. This is the minimum amount that we're required to pay each month. And in this illustration, right, you and I have been faithfully making the minimum payment. But you know what happened? You showed up to this sermon series last week and you said, man, I'm ticked off. We're not living this way anymore. We're going to do something about it. And what I'm about to show you, look, this could change your life forever. Are you looking at me? Don't miss this, because some of you, I know money's emotional. And you're like, man, I hate this subject. Me too. But this could change your life. Okay, here's what's going to happen in order to make this work. Okay, listen. You're going to find an extra $200 a month. Now, you're already thinking, I know, where in the world am I going to find an extra $200 a month? I don't know the answer to that question. You're going to have to get very creative to find that extra $200. if you have to take a second job as an Uber Eats driver, or, here's another one, you could eliminate your cable television. Not that, right? Or your high-speed internet plan, or cut out some of the streaming services that you currently have, or start brown bagging it to lunch, or here's one, stop eating out most meals, or skipping your $5 daily dose of overpriced caffeine. Find the 200. I guarantee you, everyone I've talked to about this in my office, they found the 200. And here's what you're going to do with that 200 a month. It's going to change a future generation in your family. Here's how it will play. Let's start with Lowe's. We owe them $450. Your minimum payment is what? What's it say? $50, right? Now we're going to pay them $50 and add to it the $200 that we just found, totaling $250 a month. And with only a matter of months, Lowe's is gone. Bye-bye, Lowe's, right? We'll never have to worry about that debt again. Now we're going to let the money start to snowball away the debt. How will we do it? We're going to go after Target, right? We've already been paying Target $30 a month. Now we're going to take the $30 and add to it the $250. You say, well, where did we get the $250 a month? We just freed up $250 a month because we paid off Lowe's. We're going to take that $250 and the $30, and together now we got $280. And guess what? In just a few months, Target is gone as well. The snowball is starting to get bigger. Now let's take our parents. We're paying them $200 a month. We'll add it to the $280 that we freed up because we no longer have to pay Lowe's or Target. Now we got $480 a month, and we're going to pay off mom and dad. And then again, in a few short months, mom and dad are paid for. They're happy. We're happy. And now we're going to take the money and let it grow every single month and apply it to the next step that we owe, starting with the smallest amount of debt so we can knock it out, going line by line to the largest. We're going to pay off all of our debt with the debt snowball. We're going to wipe out all the credit card and other debts that we have. Now, I'm telling you, look at me. Rachel's somewhere. She's sitting right back there. This is exactly what we did 30 years ago to get out of the pickle we were in. So the big question we have is, how will this benefit us in the long run? Now, let me show you something that's really, really amazing. If you continue to pay minimum payments like most people in America do, it's going to take you 120 months to pay off your debt. Think about it. That's 10 years before you pay off the debt, assuming you don't take on any more debt. And let's be honest, do you really think in the next 10 years you would not take on additional debt? Remember what we said last week? If you're in debt when you don't have much money, the trajectory is when you have more money, you'll just have more debt. That's why the answer isn't just make more money, because I just need a better job where I make more money, then we'll be able to manage all our debt payments. No, it's about being out of debt by changing our values. Now watch this. If you do the debt snowball, your payoff time is not 120 months, not 10 years, but instead it's only 21 months. That's a difference of 99 months of not paying any debt. Wow. All right, I want you to do me a favor. Reach down, fasten your seatbelt. Do it. Come on. This is going to get really good. Fasten that thing. Stop thinking about Disney, right? If you take $1,110, say, wait, where did we get the $1,110? Look at the debt you just paid off. You freed up $1,100 a month in debt payments that you no longer have. If you take that money and invest it at 8% for that 99 months you were going to pay on debt, right? At the end of that time period, guess how much money you'll have? You'll have $153,000. Isn't that amazing, right? I mean, you can do it if you get crazy with the debt snowball. Now, look at Romans 13:8. Look what it says, because I want to bring this back, because some of you are like, ooh, it was so heavy. Look, let no debt remain outstanding except the continual debt to love, right? Right? The only debt you and I should be carrying is the debt that we carry of loving other people and loving God, right? And we learned last week, we don't serve money. We serve God. Money serves us as we serve God. I pray this morning, look, that you'll get excited about the possibility of living a life not being strapped financially. Rachel and I can stand here today and tell you it feels so much better. Right? You can do this with the help of God. And as we're faithful to God, we've got to get focused, right? You got to get a plan. We've got to have a sacrificial attitude, right? You can't live like everyone else. My sons used to say to Rachel and I, Dad, how come you don't drive a nicer car? And I drive an okay car. It's a Nissan. I mean, nobody goes out to my car and covets. I mean, I get that. I mean, nobody's like, wow, look at this car, right? You know why I don't? I could. I choose not to. Why? Because I don't want to be in debt. I don't want to pay that payment just to look cool. Listen, you know why you're trying to keep up with the Joneses? Just remember the Joneses filed bankruptcy last year. Don't try to keep up with them. The more passion we get about this, the faster it can be done and the wiser financial decisions we're able to make. Now, here's something that really bothers me, and the board of directors at Spring will tell you, this is why I hate talking about money. I watch some of you kind of just glaze over when I talk about this stuff because you're like, Matt, I could never do this. And I understand how difficult it is to see the possibility of living without being strapped. But I don't want you, I'm begging you, don't walk away without trying. My heart breaks because some of you, this morning, some of you watching, you're going to give up and live in bondage and debt. And as a result, you won't be able to do what you want to do because the debt continues to pile up. I'm praying, I have been praying all week, that God would speak to you today. I can't convince you, I know that. But I'm praying that God can. And He will lead you to have your finances totally transformed. And some of you, I guess, maybe you might push back, and maybe this is your first, second, or time here, say, man, why are you talking about this stuff in church? I thought I'd hear like a sermon on why war's wrong and all that stuff. I mean, it'd be perfect timing, right? Man, this is what school is for. I don't know about you. I've been to a lot of schooling in my life. They didn't teach me this in school. Did you have a class on this? Did you have a class where they said, here's how to get out of debt, here's how to manage? It ought to be something that's taught. But the reason we're taking time at Springbrook to talk about it is because managing your money, listen, is one of the most spiritual things you could do. In fact, it's one of the most visible outward evidences of where our heart is spiritually. And what we do with the resources that God has entrusted you and me, it really does matter. See, if you're faithful with a little, God will trust you with much. Sacrifice, self-control, and planning makes a huge difference in dealing with debt. What do you think your life would look like if one day you had no credit card payments? Can you imagine? Can you imagine what it would be like if you had no car payments? Can you imagine what it would feel like if you had no student loan payments? What do you think you could do for the glory of God if you broke free from what everybody else is doing? How could you live like no one else, all for the glory of the one who gave His Son, Jesus Christ, for you? It can be done. I'm just telling you, you can do it. We have hope. Don't give up. Some of you, when you walk out of here this morning, when I say this, I don't mean fight with each other, but fight like crazy and watch as God can help you deliver you from the bondage of debt. Let's agree this morning, we're all adults, that it's about time for all of us to act our wage. So, just like last week, I want you to spend some time thinking about what we talked about today. If you're married, and I often tell this to couples in my office, you need to have a money date. You know what a money date is? Yeah, it's where it gets ugly. No, a money date is where you choose a time and a place and you talk about finances, right? It's not right after you worked all day, right? It's not after the credit card bill comes in, but it's a designated time where you talk, you don't accuse, but you talk to actually get a good look at your finances. You know what I've discovered in 6 years of doing this calling, being a pastor? You know what I've discovered? When people come talk to me, most people have no idea how much money they make or how much they spend. I'm flabbergasted. Listen, it needs to be that kind of talk. If you're single, talk with some friends, get an accountability partner to help you, and seek wisdom from someone you trust that's further along financially. In your community group, come on, in your community groups, have these conversations. I know people don't want to talk about it, but we all face this stuff. So let me give you some questions that'll help you. Here's the first one. How has your life been affected by debt? Man, that could take all night, couldn't it? Anybody here have a happy story about debt? Yeah, I got in so much debt, man, did it feel good? You know, debt never makes your marriage feel better. You know, debt never makes your self-worth stronger. Debt never makes you closer to God. If debt did that, I'd say, man, let's all go in debt. It doesn't work. Question number 2, which of the 3 biblical values of acting your wage do you struggle with the most? Which you need to start focusing on improving? Pick one of the 3. And say, you know what, today I'm going to learn sacrifice. Today I'm just going to figure out how to have some self-control. I know it's on sale. I know it looks good. Everybody's got one. I'm going to focus. Question number 3, if you're struggling with debt, what immediate steps do you need to take to address it? Let me tell you something. If you say, I just need to make more money, you're not dealing with debt. You're dealing with the income side. And if you don't deal with the debt side, you'll just make more money and you'll do what? Get in more debt. This is so practical. I hope you'll take what we've talked about today and begin to work on it. Let's pray together. Father, these kind of subjects about money and debt, they seem so non-spiritual. They seem like, God, these ought to be talked about maybe with a financial counselor or advisor. And yet, Father, we recognize that what we're seeing going on in our world right now, the wars and rumors of wars, countries fighting, our own government spending trillions it doesn't have, borrowing money against something there's really nothing to borrow against. Father, we don't want to live that way. What the government does is way above my pay grade. Father, what happens on the other side of the world I can't fix, but Father, here's what we know in our little bitty homes that we live in with our spouses if we're married, or with our friends, or in our community group. There's some things that we can do. So Father, when gas goes to $4 or $5 or $6 a gallon, we're not fretting, we're not worrying, because we've not lived to the edge of our income and beyond. We've not bought something to live in that we can't afford. We're not driving something that we have no business owning. Father, that we're managing our resources so that when those difficult times come, if they do, that we have the freedom in our resources to help others. Father, thank you for reminding us of these truths today. Father, there may be some people in this room who are watching online who feel guilt and shame when we talk about this. Father, there should be no guilt or shame. It'll never motivate us to do something different. It makes us feel bad. We'll beat ourselves up. And then we'll end up taking ourselves to dinner on a credit card to feel better. We'll end up going to the mall and buy something to feel better and increase our problems. So I pray, Father, today, without the guilt, without the shame, that today before you, you would encourage us. Give us the wisdom and the strength to practice these three values and to begin getting unstrapped. Father, I pray for those in this room and those watching who maybe aren't Christ followers. And while all this information is so practical, even if you don't know Christ, Father, if we get out of debt and we still don't know you, we've missed the whole reason for living. And so I pray that today, those watching and those in this room who don't understand how much you love them, that they would take one more step towards you to discover how much you want a relationship with him. Father, thanks for showing up today. Thanks for speaking to us. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen. In a moment, I'm going to hang down here when we're done. And I'd love to pray for you. And you say, Matt, well, I don't know if I want to come forward today. Everybody's going to think I got financial problems. Let me take it off the hook here. Anybody who comes forward is a millionaire. There we go. And they're going to pray with me about how to spend their millions, right? It's not about that. I'd love to pray for you in this issue of debt and how to take that next step. Please give yourself an opportunity to let God do his best work in you as you make these changes. I don't know how many of you are coffee drinkers. How many coffee drinkers in the room? Excellent. Me too. We're all addicted to something, right? You recognize this logo right here? That is who? The Starbucks logo. Let me grab my note here. The Starbucks logo is the most famous coffee chain ever in America. And it's interesting, a few years ago, the founder of that company Howard Schultz, decided to step away and let a new leadership team come in. Did you know that? And when that happened, subsequently, things began to change for Starbucks. They lost money. They lost clients, believe it or not, customers. And I want you to look at this quote. This is from Howard Schultz, the founder. He wrote this in his book. The damage was slow and quiet, incremental, like a single loose thread that unravels a sweater inch by inch. Decision by decision, store by store, customer by customer, Starbucks was losing some of the signature traits that it had been founded on. In other words, it wasn't one big decision. It was a series of small decisions that increased their losses. You know, finances are like that too, right? Nobody gets up one day and says, you know what I want to do, John? I want to file bankruptcy tomorrow. I'm just feeling it. You know what? Let's send our house into repossession. What do you think, right? Nobody strives for that. But here's what happens. Little decisions have big consequences. But it's also true the other way. Think about this. You know, one of the best ways to hold your finances loosely is to understand generosity. It's true. That when you understand it's not yours and you begin to give it away, all of a sudden you say, I don't want to be in debt to a lender. I want to do things for people, right? Not just talk about people in Ukraine. I actually want to do something. So at Springbrook, we believe that generosity teaches us how to get out of the trap of holding on to money or spending money the wrong way. That's why every week I say there are boxes on the walls where you can give when you leave. There's a giving kiosk in the lobby where you can give. You can give at our website or through our app. And when you begin to give that way, it's amazing. All of a sudden it breaks the bondage of money in your life. And you know the best time to start to be generous? I know, when I get all my credit cards paid off. You know the best time to start to be generous? Is today. It's to start today. Say, you know what? Here's what we say, and I think I have it on the screen. If you've never given before, why don't you give something, right? And if you've been giving something, you say, I don't have a lot to give. I got debts to pay. I get it. We don't want you in debt. Pay your debts. But start giving consistently. And then when you start giving consistently, how awesome would it be that you were to give generously? And together we can make a difference in this community and around the world. It all starts with learning the principles of generosity. Hey, thanks for being here today. Thanks for sitting through this message. We'll see you next Sunday. Take care.